What happens when a neighborhood's strict HOA meets a rebellious dad determined to unleash joy, laughter, and a bit of chaos? Get ready for a showdown you won't forget. Before we begin today's deranged HOA story, tell me you haven't had your fill of irrational and power-grabbing HOA nonsense. Smash that like button to show you're on my side, and drop a comment if you've ever faced off against an overbearing homeowners association. As I stood gaping at the audacity of Gloria and her bland army of HOA enforcers, a bunch of clipboard-wielding minions straight out of a dystopian sitcom, it occurred to me that emergency custody over trumpet notes was not just absurd, it was genuinely batty. "This is a neighborhood, not a comedy club," Gloria declared with her steel blue eyes glimmering like I had just planted a landmine in her pristine lawn. All I could think about was how they might as well have come dressed in a giant fruit costume. What's next? Are they going to hand out tickets for too much laughter? Should I start tacking up a sign that reads, "Serious fun only"? I scanned my porch for a moment, and there sat Milo, barely holding back a laugh, his phone already poised to capture the moment, as if he were filming the most riveting episode of Surreal Suburban Showdowns. Just then, my dad burst through the gate, a soft breeze rustling his loose plaid shirt, which ironically clashed horribly with the perfectly manicured hedges all around him. He prided himself on his ability to channel a retired rock star, and today's rock star energy was amplified by what I can only guess was an extra dose of coffee and maybe a dash of old-school rebellion. "What's all this ruckus about?" he hollered, causing at least two of the HOA goons to visibly flinch. "I thought we were bringing the block back to life, not locking it down." I could almost see their carefully stacked grievance papers crumbling at the alpha male virtue being exuded. My dad was the unexpected hero in this lunacy, a legend ready to wrestle the nefarious HOA, despite being well past his prime. Let's be honest, he hadn't wrestled anyone since he accidentally pinned a couch during our last family move. A glorious snap of amusement cracked through my annoyance as I imagined my dad running at Gloria like a runaway train fueled by nostalgia. Sure enough, he tightened the straps on his sandals. This was serious business only. "Oh, you think you can just come here and threaten family happiness, huh?" he boomed, waving his arms as if directing a wild orchestra composed of everyone in the neighborhood, minus those dreadful HOA members, of course. The look on Gloria's face was priceless as she gathered what dignity remained while standing amongst the polite but bemused onlookers. I swear, her face turned such a shade of brick red that I feared she might spontaneously combust, or, worse, launch a petition aiming to ban my dad from ever showing his face again. "Listen here, people. Playing an instrument should bring joy, not tyrannical rules." My dad's voice elevated like a football coach riling up his underdog team before the big game. His passion sent the sentiments of rebellion rippling through the group of neighbors, who clearly weren't happy about a possible dictatorship run by Gloria and her cadre of visualizers of the so-called community code. They had probably passed a guideline on how to breathe too loudly. I caught Milo elbowing our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who clutched her cat, Mr. Whiskers, as if he were a life raft. Mr. Whiskers looked decidedly unimpressed, his weary eyes simply saying, "Can we go back to napping now?" Just as we were all gripping our invisible popcorn, the absurd spectacle crescendoed. My dad decided a display of physical defiance was in order, and without further ado, he lunged forward, missing the first couple of steps because who doesn't trip while trying to appear ridiculously heroic? The rest of the scene was akin to a slow-motion moment from a sports movie. There stood Gloria, clipboard in one hand with a look of pure horror spread across her impeccably contoured face, while my dad charged like a knight entering battle, all heart, a little uncoordinated, but with an undeniable flair. I knew I should have stopped him, but I was too lost in the hilarity of it all, imagining the headlines. "Local dad silences HOA with aggressive dad moves." In an epic showdown that would make a wrestling match envious, my dad tossed some banter trash in Gloria's direction. "Don't make me file a noise complaint on your cold demeanor." The children, who had previously waited for my son's trumpet solo in boredom, now erupted into a cacophony of giggles. Even the dogs, madly barking at the sharp clash of wills, seemed to approve of this spontaneous rebellion against HOA absurdity. Honestly, I should have probably been mortified, but the glorious comedy of the situation overpowered any concern for decorum. It was like a finely tuned slapstick routine, where the punchline was woven into our very existence, right here on the street. Was this just the start of our block's liberation against the tyranny of boring bylaws? As my dad barreled toward Gloria, it hit me. We were at a sheer precipice of transformation. "This is the moment," I muttered, envisioning once-in-a-lifetime neighborhood history. My father, a crusader against the reign of Bland, hell-bent on dethroning the HOA queen. Just as I was ready to make a dramatic slow-motion dash into the fray, I realized, no matter who won this showdown, it would go down in the annals of neighborhood lore. I turned to Milo, sharing a barely contained grin. What do you think, buddy? Should I grab our trumpets for the encore? It was official. This was going to be one wild block party at the very least. What other entertaining surprises awaited us that day? As my dad collided with the HOA's formal decorum, I watched in disbelief, half expecting him to pull out a dramatic sword made of all his accumulated dad wisdom. The look on Gloria's face could only be described as a blend of shock and horror, as though he'd just shown up at her meticulously planned garden party with a piñata in one hand and a confetti cannon in the other. "This is how things are done in our neighborhood, huh?" he barked, sending a wave of high-pitched gasps from the HOA members. It was as if a stray tornado had just emerged from the depths of the neighborhood block, tearing through the pristine regulations and shattered a few egos on the way. I felt pride bubbling within me, even amidst my racing excitement over the impending disaster. Watching my dad embrace his inner rebellious pelican made me realize that some battles are more than just personal. They become epic stories that get retold at gatherings. Milo, trying to conceal his laughter, leaned back against the porch railing, which was now a makeshift spectator stand. He dramatically raised an eyebrow, mouthing to me, "What's next? A dance-off?" Oh, if only. I could totally see it. The HOA members, clad in their blazers and sensible shoes, reluctantly breaking into some cringe-worthy 90s retro steps as my dad led a dance battalion of lovingly offbeat neighborhood children. Yes, Gloria and her minions could probably learn a thing or two about rhythm and community bonding. Suddenly, the mood shifted. Tension hung in the air like an uninvited guest, and I could feel the daisies in Gloria's immaculate scheme, about to be crushed under the stampede of righteous comedy about to ensue. "Your days are numbered, Gloria," my dad shouted, clearly channeling the spirit of a fierce gladiator. Yikes. Who knew there was a hidden philosopher in my dad's plaid shirt? The few neighbors watching nodding approvingly was a sight to behold, as they exchanged knowing glances like we were all in on the biggest inside joke the neighborhood had ever seen. I mean, who even wrote these rules? Is it the same person who invented plain oat bran for breakfast, or was a black and white film critic? He fumed, turning on his heels, throwing another volley of verbal sass like he was launching a cannonball in a fruit fighting contest. Honestly, it was hard to keep a straight face as I pictured Gloria's clipboard getting beamed by a volley of fruit from the flamboyantly colored piñata my dad was channeling his energy towards. I leaned in closer to Milo, whispering with barely contained glee, "Next, we should paint the whole block in neon colors to celebrate this moment. A true rebellion against Bland." My quick and rather suggestive sidestep into creative madness elicited an appreciative laugh from Milo, who seemed to be scrapping notes in his mind for a future graphic design project based on our neighborhood's newfound absurdity. Meanwhile, my dad's continued defense of trumpet playing echoed like a proud anthem of nonconformity set to music. Gloria was visibly flailing, perhaps even becoming that meme of the guy sweating profusely while solving a math problem. Watching her desperate attempts to maintain control while wallowing in a sea of unexpected absurdity was the most glorious entertainment I had witnessed in ages. Just as Gloria opened her clipboard to attempt an authoritative retort, "Bless the beauty of bureaucracy," a kid screeched, "Can we have snacks now?" The question cut through the gathering tension, plain and simple. In an ironic twist, I found myself oddly proud to be raising my son in the kind of neighborhood where the art of rebellion blended seamlessly with cookie negotiations. I mean, what's a public confrontation without snacks? It's practically against the rules, I quipped, prompting even more chuckles from my fellow rebels. Maybe we needed a council of snack choices in addition to the HOA. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, cat and all, offering, "I have cookies, but only if we promise to sing a triumphant victory song afterward." Talk about a brilliant way to distract from the impending doom. At this point, I was practically vibrating with exhilaration. It wasn't just my dad fighting against corporate stagnation dressed as a homeowners association. This vibrant patchwork of people was beginning to weave itself into something more beautiful, our collective identity. What next? I chuckled, catching sight of an exceptionally bemused bird perched on Gloria's shoulder. Would it be enough if we simply won them over with the potential for a joyful jam session right in the middle of the street? Just as I voiced an invitation to collective hilarity, my son scrambled up the stairs, horn held high as if claiming victory over the HOA. I could already see the wheels of inspiration turning in their minds, envisioning an epic trumpet brigade crashing the faux regal facade of Gloria's iron grip. As my dad and I shared a grin that was equal parts mischief and pride, a spontaneous chorus of defiance started spiraling around the assembled crowd, unintentionally launching us all into a musical rebellion. My heart raced. Would we now be petitioning our talented town for a debate over which instrument should lead this around-the-block festivity? The ironic twist of this bizarre local governance turning into a community orchestra was not the ending I had expected at a routine complaint-handling meeting. How was it possible that this chaotic scene was just a mere reflection of our shared experience? Gloria's eyes widened, caught in the whirlwind of creativity and camaraderie. It felt incredibly liberating, a heartwarming invitation to redefine the experience of living within this suburb, one joyful note at a time. The HOA may have come equipped with mandates, I proclaimed dramatically, arms flailing to the rhythm of an imaginary victory tune. But were we not armed with laughter, unity, and the art of trumpet playing madness? This was indeed the beginning of our orchestra, and as I rallied the neighborhood together, I could feel us squarely on the path of turning HOA guidelines into an epic saga of neighborhood lore that would be retold for generations. Could this be the spark to push the HOA back into their dull offices, muttering about chastising rules? How delightful it would be to discover we had sparked enough movement to make Gloria consider a new role, perhaps patrolling our neighborhood on a unicycle instead of wielding a clipboard. Just as the spontaneous neighborhood symphony began to crescendo, Gloria's meticulous poise cracked like an old porcelain doll with a few too many crazed lines. The look on her face shifted from pure outrage to bewilderment, and I half expected her to pull out an ancient scroll of HOA rules like it was a sword, ready to duel any instrumental miscreant gracelessly invading her orderly existence. "You can't just," she sputtered, only to be drowned out by the exuberant honking of my son's tiny horn, which now resembled the lead trumpet in this should-be chaotic orchestra. I had to admit, watching her stutter like a malfunctioning robot was practically the highlight of my day, the cherry on top of this hilarious cake of suburban rebellion. How deliciously ironic that all it took was a single inflatable pool, some conjured chaos, and a blast of dad power to send this tightly wound community off the rails. With the HOA members thoroughly stumped, the absurdity of the situation sent ripples of laughter through the crowd like shockwaves. Neighbors who might normally just exchange pleasantries along the fence were now united in laughter, transforming a mundane Saturday into a moment we would reminisce about for years. Milo, trying to keep it cool, masked his laughter behind a nearby panel of daisies, but I could see his shoulders shaking. Perhaps if we all threw confetti in the air while synchronized swimming through Gloria's righteousness, we'd officially break some HOA rules, he quipped, and I guffawed louder than the kids twirling around us in delight. It was like witnessing the unlikely convergence of an invigorated circus and an organized pep rally, and Gloria sat there, unamused, probably calculating how many countable violations would soon emerge from this riotous joy. I leaned forward, soaking in the sheer hilarity unfolding, when I realized that under Gloria's baffled demeanor lay a valuable lesson that transcended the mere confines of HOA mandates. If we could turn a custody emergency into a laughter-fueled festivities ridiculous enough to shake the very ground of our neat little neighborhood, then maybe we could finally unveil the magical properties of unity against unyielding rules. I glanced at my dad, who seemed to be plotting his next move as if choreographing a masterpiece in spontaneous rebellion. The remaining HOA members nervously nibbled on their pens and hovered over clipboards like ducks guarding their nests, but I could see the faintest hint of a burgeoning power struggle, one where we, the joyful masses, were asserting our right to a little fun. And then, as if on cue, it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, little Timmy, the wiry 8-year-old with boundless energy, leaped into action. He'd apparently concocted an ingenious dance-off challenge right there in the center of our street, beckoning the hesitant onlookers to join him. "Come on, neighbors, let's dance and make Gloria go bananas," he squealed, and I nearly choked on my own exhilaration. I never understood how an inflatable pool wrestling incident could fuel a mini-revolution, but this little spark of rebellion surely had set the flames ablaze. If only I could record this for my own personal comedy special. Who would believe that inflatable pool wrestling led to an HOA showdown? The very thought of Gloria hopping awkwardly, her polished shoes attempting to tap dance, created a picture so absurd that I could hardly keep a straight face. The dance-off transformed our street into a vibrant festival of creativity, laughter, and collective rebellion. Neighbors discarded their inhibitions with reckless abandon, blooming into a swirling mass of spontaneous choreography. This was nothing short of revolutionary. In the midst of cheering and giggling, I found myself swept up in the spirit of it all, swinging my hips and attempting to mimic the exaggerated dance moves that my dad had inherently mastered over the years. I realized then that our little enclave could either yield to the rules imposed by Gloria or dance away from the grip of the absurdity of HOA life. Fearlessly, we opted for the latter, shaking off the shackles and embracing this quirky freedom, fully aware that for once, the authoritative glare of suburbia was eclipsed by joyous irreverence. As the rhythm swelled and laughter rang out like chimes in the breeze, I caught sight of Gloria, wrestling valiantly to regain her authority. The irony of watching someone who could single-handedly declare a community emergency suddenly caught in a dance-off was the ultimate poetic justice. She twisted and turned, desperately attempting to maintain that illusion of control, while the rest of us blared trumpets and wiggled like we were at a wild music festival. It made me wonder if we'd become metaphorical gladiators of joy, battling the stuffy confines of property guidance armed only with laughter and a capacity for spontaneous fun. Perhaps we would forever be marked as the neighborhood that dared to honor silliness. But honestly, wasn't that the kind of legacy every vibrant community would deserve? Just then, my dad's voice rose like a buoyant wave above the cacophony. Ladies and gentlemen, we hereby ordain ourselves as supreme emissaries of good vibes. The HOA rules are now mere suggestions. A collective cheer erupted louder than I had ever expected, and I found myself standing tall among my semi-dazed neighbors, all sporting absurd expressions of solidarity and rebellion. Could it be that this spontaneous throwing off of the chains of authority led us to a new way of life in our overly polished neighborhood? Were we crafting the advertisements of tomorrow's successful neighborhoods fueled not by compliance, but by a symphony of spirited joy? Perhaps the usual stern image of community governance would transform into something dazzlingly eccentric, a place where vibration and fun could melt the most calculated of regimes into mere shadows of their former selves. As the last victorious notes faded and neighbors lingered in the glow of our collective victory, I felt a sense of camaraderie palpable enough to drown out any HOA threats of emergency police or eviction notices. There we were, a gathering of the rebellious and untamed spirit, a true community painting a mural of laughter on the blank wall of suburbia. Was this a new beginning? A chance for everyone to embrace the joy of shared humanity, rather than fear a strict guideline? My heart raced with hope, and I dared to imagine what would unfold next. Would our infectious enthusiasm take the HOA by storm? Or would Gloria retract quietly into her realm of nonplussed decorum, forever haunted by unexpected melodies? What if we could genuinely turn this chaos into a revolution, one horn blast at a time? As the echoes of our dance-off began to fade and neighborly laughter trailed off into the warm afternoon, a slight tension settled back over the street. Gloria, the well-coiffed tyrant of the HOA, stood defiantly in the middle of our joyous rebellion, her clipboard clutched like a shield against the picturesque chaos. It was clear she was recalibrating her strategy, while her impeccably manicured nails tapped impatiently against the polished wood, an unmistakable signal of escalating authority. But honestly, could her bouncy contemptuousness ever compete with our burst of absurd creativity? I doubted it. My dad, still basking in the aftermath of his powerful declaration, leaned towards me with eyes sparkling like mischief incarnate, clearly relishing the surreal victory we'd conjured with our spontaneous uprising. "Jordan," he grinned, "did you ever think that an inflatable pool and a little horn playing would morph into an all-out neighborhood rebellion? I mean, seriously, what's next? Having a bake-off to dethrone Gloria?" He chuckled, clearly envisioning a world where brownies could become valid weapons of community resistance. I could hardly contain my laughter at the mental image of all the neighbors, trading their spatulas for trumpets, marching defiantly in aprons emblazoned with slogans like "sugar and spice over HOA's advice." A booming laugh escaped me, as I realized it wasn't just my dad's humor, but the whole neighborhood's unwillingness to submit to ridiculousness brought this entertaining vision to life. It left me wondering, could we actually sustain this outrageous rebellion, or had we just peaked at inflatable pools and dance-offs? Fiery determination fueled my spirit. It was time to turn intention into reality. Milo sidled up next to me, effortlessly snagging a freshly opened can of soda from the cooler my neighbor had strategically plopped down near the now-defunct inflatable pool. "So what's next in our glorious, bizarre chapter of neighborhood history?" he asked, obviously expecting me to whip out a plan with the precision of a seasoned general laying siege. "I mean, if we've got Gloria on the ropes, shouldn't we capitalize on this? How about a petition, maybe? Or nudge everyone toward advocating for neighborhood bingo? They'll never see it coming." His eyes sparkled with excitement as he gestured grandly, making it abundantly clear he was ready to ride this wave of absurdity all the way to the fridge. I could hardly argue against his contagious enthusiasm. Perhaps, just perhaps, we could redefine the HOA's rules into something wonderfully ludicrous while basking a little in our own self-constructed mythology. Before I could muster a response, little Timmy bounced back into the scene, positively vibrating with energy. "Jordan, can I help with the next big plan?" he queried, the corners of his mouth smeared with the remnants of cotton candy. I could lead a parade that could take Gloria down even more. He dramatically swung his arms in a showmanship of theatrical flair that told me reinforcements were already rallying. I chuckled at the sheer brilliance of that idea. A parade led by a charismatic 8-year-old could be our pièce de résistance. If Gloria was flustered by trumpet players, how in the world would she handle a brigade of kids marching with glitter, confetti, and their very own inflatable float? The whole notion rang joyfully ridiculous, and I could literally see the sparkle of possibilities surfacing in Timmy's wide eyes. "Well, how about it, mighty warriors of HOA Defiance?" I proclaimed to the crowd, invoking my inner commander of chaos, ready to inspire. "We've conquered the dance floor. Now, let's take this triumph to new heights. I propose we scout out every ounce of creativity in our wild hearts and plan a neighborhood parade that not even Gloria can resist. We'll make it a celebration of all things ridiculous." A wave of excitement surged through the gathered neighbors, their eager murmurs blending into an excited chorus of camaraderie. Inspired by their willingness to join in, I felt that tiny ember of chaos burst into a full-blown flame, invigorating the atmosphere. The mere thought of a parade where the HOA lady might not just shake but completely lose her grip struck me as overly poetic. Among the venerated traditions, perhaps we could launch her into a realm of sheer absurdity from which she'd never return. With my dad giving me a welcoming nod like the proud hockey coach of an underdog team and Milo sketching parade posters in his mind, I felt a sense of boldness wash over me. Before long, I heard 100 suggestions at once, each one increasing the level of delight and mayhem we could unleash. Gloria's reign was officially on shaky grounds, and the very thought of our concocted parade filled me with glee. It was as if we were crafting a history book that would make future generations giggle in disbelief, retelling this astonishing tale of an eruptive HOA uprising built around a few innocent inflatable pools and an assertive trumpet. Would our parade rally transform the oppressive aura of the neighborhood into a carefree phenomenon, or would the inevitable clash with Gloria's authority reignite her passion for imposing draconian rules? The excitement crackled in the air, and I couldn't wait to find out. As the excited chatter of the neighborhood enveloped us like a warm, absurd blanket, my mind was already spinning the glorious vision of our parade into action. "All right, folks, listen up," I exclaimed, tapping my glass-laden hand against a cooler for emphasis. An improvised podium of soft drinks and snacks creating an unexpected air of authority. First, we need a name for our uprising. Something that really captures the essence of rebellion against Gloria's iron grip and celebrates the sheer ludicrousness of inflatable pools. The neighbors exchanged wild ideas, each more outrageous than the last. "How about the Great Floaty Uprising?" suggested Miss Jenkins from next door, an enthusiastic senior with a penchant for crochet. Laughter erupted as she continued, "And everyone can wear pool noodles as armor." It was sheer genius. The image of senior citizens triumphantly galloping on inflatable flamingos with pool noodles, boldly standing in defiance of Gloria's clipboard, nearly knocked me off my imaginary podium. I couldn't help but grin. The audacity of our mightiest warriors was inspiring. I could practically envision the local newspaper's headline, "Neighborhood gathers to declare war on duct tape regime. Riotous parade ensues." Yet, as spirited suggestions poured in, I quickly realized we needed clarity amid our joyous chaos. Okay, we need to get organized here," I called out, raising my hands high like a conductor at a symphony of silliness. "Who's up for decoration duties? I want us to win this battle with pizzazz." A handful of neighbors volunteered, brandishing rolls of streamers as if they were knights lifting their swords in allegiance. My dad, rolling a nearby watermelon toward the front, raised an eyebrow. "Are we really planning to invade HOA offices with a watermelon float?" I suppressed laughter, envisioning an entire brigade of watermelon-themed floats cascading through the streets, catching Gloria utterly off guard. It felt so right, yet so avant-garde. As the idea began to crystallize into something tangible, Timmy claimed the role of chief parade consultant, with all the gravitas only an 8-year-old can muster. "And I'll be the drum major," he bellowed, thrusting the remnants of cotton candy into the air like a victorious flag. We need music. Lots of music. I could see his mind racing with possibilities. Maybe a kazoo band would launch our parade into iconic territory. The neighbors laughed and cheered while I mentally charted how much we could stretch our silliness. Banners emblazoned with slogans like, "Less rules, more fun," danced in my thoughts, each one bouncing buoyantly atop a giant inflatable flower float. Our delightful insurrection was quickly transforming into the most extravagant display of color, sound, and absurdity that this neighborhood had ever witnessed, overshadowing even Gloria's best-laid plans with mere imagination and charm. Of course, in this fever pitch of creativity, I almost forgot about the looming specter of the HOA's wrath. Just as I was reveling in the rising enthusiasm, Milo's wide eyes narrowed with concern. "Hey, we should probably consider a contingency plan, in case Gloria has guards or an emergency board meeting or something." The reality of our impending confrontation hung like an unwelcome shadow over what should have been our festive brainstorming session. My dad, not one to back down from a fight, leaned in and nodded. "Wise thinking, kid. If Gloria decides to mobilize her army of community guidelines, we'll outmaneuver her with sheer absurdity and creativity. But we need a battle strategy." A mini-campaign emerged. Contingency beach towels, inflatable sharks, and an escape plan involving skateboarders dressed as lifeguards. As euphoric laughter bubbled through our makeshift council, Gloria's image loomed like a distant storm cloud, waiting to rain on our inflatable parade. Just then, as if summoned by the mere thought of her, we heard the telltale power-tripping click arriving in the distance. Wispy clouds began rolling across the sky, casting ominous shadows. "Attention!" Gloria's voice sliced through the air, sharper than a freshly polished clipboard. "I demand to know what this ruckus is." The neighbors froze, and in that moment, I was filled with an odd mixture of dread and exhilaration. Suddenly, thinking on my feet seemed vastly underrated. We're just planning the neighborhood's inaugural community fun parade," I called back, layering my tone with an exaggerated cheerfulness that was only partially constructed. I could see her pausing, her platinum blonde hair glinting defiantly under the evening sun as she assessed the absurd assembly before her, brimming with mischief. The transformation of our fearless gathering into a frantic survival scene was sudden and severe. As Gloria stormed closer, armed with that infamous clipboard, she looked uncomfortably like an agent of chaos yoked to community guideline. A parade? Without approval? She hissed like a villain in an over-the-top melodrama, scanning our colorful conspiracy. My heart raced as her sharp gaze landed on me, and I could sense the hole in my bravado, an insatiable gravity pulling me back toward the reasonable realm of compliance. The air shimmered with tension as the crowd exhaled a collective breath, our potential defiance hanging in the balance between our zany dreams and her clipboard-carrying tyranny. Milo, steadfast by my side, bent his slightly broken straw into the air like a mischievous lightsaber, ready to battle legality with ludicrousness. Had we just ignited the fiercest neighborhood showdown in suburbia's colorful history? The moment stood still, and the clash of wills felt monumental. My dad, channeling his inner gladiator, strolled forward beside me, looking for all the world like he was ready to take on a corrupt emperor. "Gloria," Dad proclaimed, projecting courage like a true hero. "You can't stifle creativity. You can't crush fun. This is about the vibrancy of life, and if you think you can waltz in here with your clipboard and ruin our parade, well..." He trailed off for dramatic effect, glancing around as a chorus of enthusiastic murmurs began building up. It became clear that resistance was not just brewing, it was bubbling over. Gloria's clipboard might have held power, but I could practically feel the chains of her dreariness beginning to crack under the weight of our absurdity. This was more than a battle for an inflatable parade. It was a fight for our right to be audacious. A showdown was precipitating on our suburban battleground. What would happen next? Just as the tension reached critical mass, a complete spectacle of outrageousness and bubbling potential, the crowd erupted into a cacophony of laughter that echoed through our suburban oasis. It wasn't the oppressive annoyance of Gloria's clipboard glaring at us. No, this was a spontaneous bonfire of community spirit. Fueled by the hilarity of our plight, I decided it was time to escalate our impromptu rebellion into theatrical brilliance. I rummaged through my oversized bag and, as luck would have it, found the very toy trumpet my son had used during that now legendary trumpet incident. "Ladies and gentlemen," I declared, brandishing the instrument as if it were the key to the kingdom, "let me remind you of how we defeated the formidable sounds of HOA oppression." I blew through the trumpet, producing an absurd honk that sent a wave of giggles spiraling through the group. The snippet of music jolted me into a frenzy of animated gestures. Picture this, the majestic Horns Against Havoc marching band, featuring yours truly on the trumpet. Each honk escalated in volume, while my neighbors followed suit, raising their arms and letting out absurd honking noises that formed a chaotic symphony of rebellion. "And we shall march on with an army of inflatable flamingos," I hollered amidst the giggles and collective shouts. What had begun as a brooding face-off with Gloria morphed into a carnival of pure hilarity. People were high-fiving and mimicking musical performances, channeling their inner Broadway stars. This was a revolution fueled by laughter, and Gloria, standing at the edge of our merriment, had morphed from ruler to reluctant audience member in this raucous display of absurdity. In a bizarre twist of fate, my dad, perhaps caught by the infectious spirit, began mimicking those old-school wrestling moves he loved to boast about. "You think you can silence us, Gloria? Prepare for a tag-team body slam of epic proportions," he shouted, relishing each syllable, and without warning, he pretended to charge toward her as if entering the ring of doom. The surrounding crowd gasped dramatically, some even clutching their chests as if watching a blockbuster action movie unfold. "Not today, Gloria," he yelled, with gusto befitting a professional wrestler. I was practically shaking with laughter as my dad performed a theatrical leap toward our beloved HOA president, landing with a delightfully exaggerated body slam maneuver over the fanciful hedge separating her from our merry band of misfits. "Incoming!" I hollered, and before she could even comprehend the absurdity of the situation, she was sent tumbling into an inflatable flamingo that had been positioned as part of our glorious floaty brigade. The hilarity was sublime. Gloria landed in a colorful mess, her platinum hair splayed dramatically over the flamingo's beak, which seemed to mock her indignation. The sight of her bewilderment sent shockwaves of laughter rippling through the crowd, eclipsing even the most rabid HOA disciplinary meeting. My neighbors, emboldened and electrified, started chanting, "Honk for fun, honk for freedom." It was a wild symphony of hilarity, and the discordant celebration was infectious. All at once, the formidable fortress of the HOA crumbled into a whirlpool of laughter, joy, and inflatables. It became immediately clear that our spirited rebellion was not just a reaction. It was a celebration of our identity, a symphony of vibrant resistance against the gloomy convention that had dared to dictate our lives. Fortified by this collective lunacy, I wheeled back around to face Gloria, now dusting herself off beside her new foul friend. "Gloria, you've got to admit, this is entertaining," I quipped. A gleeful smirk stretched across my face. The crowd roared in approval at my audacious innocence. "And don't you think it's about time we let a little chaos into our lives, breathe some life into those HOA guidelines? After all, the world is dull enough without a designated inflatable parade." I pointed my trusty trumpet toward the heavens like a conqueror signaling victory. With each honk vibrating throughout our street like fireworks of jubilation, I could feel the weight of titanic absurdity propelling our energy like a turbo booster on a roller coaster. As if the universe itself conspired against her, Gloria, with a begrudging aura, slowly surfaced from the depths of her flamingo daze. I could see her evaluating the situation, her clipboard wavering in her hand. Behind the smirk creeping onto her face, I could sense a begrudging respect for our audacity. Even as she opened her mouth to possibly object, the rush of cheer drowned out her words, rendering her yet another reluctant participant in our fiesta. Was this what transformation felt like? It wasn't just the HOA against us, it was our bold community against the weight of needless regulations, and somehow, laughter had prevailed as our shared anthem. As Gloria nodded, acknowledging our ingenious playfulness, I stood there, swept up in the moment as our neighborhood united in a vivid tapestry of rebellion and camaraderie. The absurdity here had pulled us together into an unlikely band of dreamers who chose inflatable over incorrigible. Would it be enough to change the pretentious system? Who knew? But as I surveyed my fierce allies touting their makeshift instruments, costumes, and laughter, all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of triumph. Perhaps this chaotic fiasco was only the beginning of something profound, where the spirit of community and the whimsical magic of rebellion collided, challenging the very fabric of what our neighborhood could be. What would the next chapter of our shared saga hold? This was just the start of a wondrous adventure. Thanks for sticking around with me through the chaos to the end. Want more high-stakes HOA drama? Check out our recent HOA clash with the video on the right, or let YouTube pick your next wild ride with the video on the left. Whichever way you go, buckle up. There's plenty more HOA insanity on the way. Tune in again for more HOA chaos.